Lads and lassies, the Premier League is back, and what a weekend to be a Sunderland fan. I don't think any of us could have asked for a better start to life in the Premier League. We've got so much to get into today, but as always, I'm Ocean, bringing you a video from the southstandclothing.com. We've got so much fanwear, hats, t-shirts, all sorts of merch ready for the season ahead. So if you're a Sunderland fan, go and check out the southstandclothing.com, and let's get right into things. Starting off, before we even get into the lineup and anything to do with the match, how good was the atmosphere at the Stadium of Light? As anyone knows that's watched the first few videos I've made in this channel, I live in Australia now, so unfortunately I can't make too many games. I'll try and get to a couple this year, but tickets become a lot more expensive when you have to fly across the entire world to get there first. But the stadium just looked bumping. Every single family member and friend that I've got on social media that was posting out and about just looked like they had the best time on Saturday. Everyone was just geared up and ready, and I think even if we came away with a result that wasn't as emphatic as this one, we would have been buzzing. Like, the fact that we're back in Premier League playing Premier League football with a team of good quality players who want to be here and a manager who's just signed on. Everything about the club feels right just now, and it's just night and day to the team that we left. I think West Ham was one of our last games we played in the Premier League, and this team and the feeling around the club is just night and day compared to then. So just starting on a good note, the tifo, the fans, everything about Saturday was amazing, and we've got to keep that up the full season because every part of that contributes to what we're going to get into in today's video. So starting off the lineup, Robin Roofs makes his debut and goal. Let's just say a commanding and confident performance from him. Yeah, and I'm so happy for him having an incredible debut like that. Then moving on to the back four. So, of course, we've got Trey Hume in at right back, Dan Ballard and Jensen Seal. All three of them were here last season, and the fact that they started in the Premier League is just a huge achievement for them. And finishing up that back lineup was Ronaldo Mandava, who we'll get onto later. Just what dependable, reliable left back. It just solid. Like, that's what you've got to say about him. Then you move into the engine room, and the three lads that just kept on going. Noah Siddiqui, Granit Xhaka and Habib Diarra. What a midfield three. Like, that midfield three is so solid. And they're topped off, of course, by the front three of Chemseen Talbi, Simon Adingra and Eliza Mayenda. So that was our starting lineup. On the bench, of course, Anthony Patterson, Dan Neil, Mark Gear, Patrick Roberts, Chris Rigg, Omar Alderete, Wilson Isidore, Enzo Lefebvre and Harrison Jones. So let's just get into it. What did you think of that starting lineup when you seen it? Because when I seen it, I looked at the back line and thought, alright, okay, I don't know if I was fully expecting Jensen Seal. Like, I kind of was looking at the players we already had at the club and going, well, out of anyone that can start, it's probably going to be Jensen, because I just couldn't see Omar Alderete getting in on time, considering that he was only announced this week. He's not really had a full pre-season as far as I'm aware, but he did end up making his appearance later on, and we'll get on to that. And then, of course, moving on to that front line, I think the middle of the park was always going to be the case with Siddiqui, with Xhaka and with Diarra. The questions around whether Enzo Lefebvre would start or not, I think it was just really a question of what would the formation be going into this. And Regis Le Bris did just stick with his classic 4-3-3. When we were defending out of possession, this seemed to drop into being a little bit of a 4-1-4-1. I'm not sure if that transpired across the whole game. Sometimes, of course, when you're watching games on TV, it's hard to see because you don't get that full pitch to be able to see how they're going out of possession. But from what I could see, it looked like a 4-1-4-1 out of possession, with Xhaka being that man in between the banks of four. But either way, I don't think there was much different we could have really done with that starting lineup. Probably questions around whether Eliza Mayenda would be the starting striker. With Mark Gio coming in for Chelsea, you'll expect him to get some minutes this year. I don't think Chelsea would have loaned him out if they weren't expecting him to get some playing time, because he did get some minutes in the European competitions for them last year in the Conference League. So I wasn't 100% sure whether we'd be seeing him play, maybe even coming on late in the game. But Eliza Mayenda looked every bit a Premier League striker, even if at times he did look pretty isolated on the field. But moving on to how the game went. So we kicked off, and from the get go, Sunderland were just ready to play football. It wasn't this sort of we're going to show up as a newly promoted side and hope you take it easy on us, or we're going to sit back and just hope for the best. Sunderland showed up to play football as well. I think they showed up as a team full of confidence, first and foremost. Players like Dan Ballard, he looked every single bit a centre half, a Premier League centre half in the weekend. I think the confidence was oozing out of him, the way he took the ball, moved past players, drove the ball up the field. He really did get involved, and I think that was the same against across the board. When you're looking at a lot of these players that Sunderland have brought in over the summer, I think there'll be a lot of people looking at them who maybe don't know Sunderland and saying, "Oh well, that's just young, random European players. Like, who are they?" Each one of these players has played at the top of their level, respectively. Like, for whatever country they've been in. You're talking about players like Noah Siddiqui and Chemstein Talbot, both playing at the top of the league, both playing at the top of their game in the Belgian Pro League. You've got players like Renildo Mandava, and who's played Champions League football for many a season. In fact, most of these players that have came in have got some sort of European competition experience. You've got Omar Alderete, who's a La Liga player of the season last year, or made the La Liga team of the season last year. And then, of course, you've got Granit Xhaka coming in as a Sunderland captain, and we've seen his experience. He quite literally led his side undefeated to a title with Bayer Leverkusen. Never mind the good work he did with Arsenal in the Premier League. So you're not just looking at players who have came in from Europe and they're young players who are raw and need help and need experience. The players that have got a lot of experience at the top of their respective leagues. So we're coming into players that have got confidence. I don't see a player like Granit Xhaka coming into Sunderland and saying, "Hi, we're here now, so let's just hope we get by and we'll see if we're still a Premier League player by the end of next year." Of course not. They're looking far beyond that. And the club have came out and said that, of course, since as well, with Christian Speakman speaking a lot about how the club have kind of safeguarded themselves. If they go down, and they'll be safe, they'll be fine in terms of financial stability, and in terms of players that they can then go on and sell and do. But they're not looking at that. They're looking forward. They're saying, right, well, who are we signing next season in the Premier League? Guys like Florent Gisolfi is already out having conversations with players, like prospective players, about, okay, if we're in the Premier League next season, is this a project you're interested in? And that's something Sunderland have done really, really well in the last 4 years. It's never just about the here and now. It's always about the what's the short term, what's the medium, and what's the long term plans for us. And that shows when you go into a Premier League, your first game in the Premier League, and you can give a performance as confident and kind of solid as they did. That shows exactly what Sunderland are about. So then, of course, as the game goes on, the first real chance we see is link-up play between Talbot, Mayenda, and Habib Diarra, who eventually gets a shot away. He does drag it wide, but I think just seeing him and how he progresses up the field, how high both him and Siddiqui get Sunderland up the field, and let's face it, there's been so many jokes about the fact that Siddiqui covered every single blade of grass. I think if you gave him a pair of scissors and his right hand, he could trim it all whilst he's also covering the whole field and making sure everyone's fine. And I think one of my favourite comments that I seen at the weekend was someone saying, not only did they cover every blade of grass, I'm pretty sure he poured my pint as well. That was hilarious. I honestly had such a laugh reading that tweet. It was so funny, but he's so true as well. The guy was everywhere. And when you look at Sunderland's run meters, we blew every single other team that's played this weekend out of the park in terms of run meters, and it's guys like Noah Siddiqui that are leading that charge. He was top of that table, followed by Granit Xhaka. So any questions of Granit Xhaka's legs been gone or not been able to keep up with the pace is just out the window. The guy was everywhere as well. One of my favourite moments, speaking of Granit Xhaka, coming from this game, so you see a man like him, and he was quite quiet in what he did. He never had any, like, there wasn't any assists from Xhaka or strikes on goal or anything like that. What he was, though, was just this quiet conductor, just balancing the orchestra, getting them all moving. When you look at that first goal in particular, so as we know, we got up to half time 0-0. Jensen Seelt comes off in the 53rd minute with an injury, which doesn't look too serious, and I'm glad because he had a really good Premier League debut, and that is one player that just was not on my radar for starting in the Premier League side. If you'd asked me around the playoff times who'll be Sunderland's starting centre halves, I think you would assume that either we'd have had new ones in but you would never assume that it was going to be Insensate was starting. But he had a fantastic debut. So he came off in the 53rd minute with what just seems like an impact injury. Regis Le Bris doesn't seem too concerned about it. He just honestly just fell a really hard landing on his back. I mean, he's a big lad, so taking that sort of impact just seemed to knock him out a little bit. Not quite literally, just hurt his back. But when you look at that first goal, so Omar Alderete came on for Jensen Seal and he's covered him there. Xhaka wants the ball out to Alderete and it doesn't happen. It gets played back into the centre halves, then gets cycled around a couple passes, gets back to Xhaka, and as soon as that passes went back to Xhaka, he puts it where he wanted it and where he was telling every other player to put it, out to Alderete. Alderete then moves up and just picks out Mayenda, like inch perfect, picks out Mayenda. Mayenda, perfect ball in. Mayenda jumps up. Might I add, when you watch it back, is the ball seems to go really slowly into the net. Mayenda got a header himself. He didn't just head the ball; he got headed off the defender. But yeah, Omar Alderete picks him out, inch perfect cross, and that's it. Back in the net, 1-0. I am so happy for Eliza Mayenda to get that first goal. I think coming into this season, there was so much questions about Sunderland's attacking ability and where the goals were going to come from. The fact that all three goals today came from players that were already at the club, it just sends a message that yes, a lot of our players are young. A lot of these players that we came up from the Championship with never cost as much money, but we bought them for a reason. These are solid players, and Eliza Mayenda is ready to take that step up to the Premier League. So yeah, Xhaka just kind of quietly conducting that one. He may not have got the assist himself, but when you go back and watch that goal, that's Xhaka's work. That's Xhaka making sure that that ball gets into him there. And I just think, yeah, it was fantastic. So moving on from that first goal, we then, of course, get that Dan Ballard header, which gets us our second goal, 2-0 up. This didn't come from nowhere, though. It wasn't like it was a random one-off header. He was at it the whole game, and West Ham knew it as well. Every single corner, they had 3-4 men attached to him, pulling his shirt, keeping him locked in. From that point of view, I don't know if Dan would have got a corner header today, because although he kept on getting his head in the ball, there was so many West Ham men just pulling him down. And every time he still managed to get his head on the ball as well, so they were doing a pretty awful job keeping him contained. But it's as if the second they came out from a corner in a set piece type environment, West Ham completely forgot about the threat. So his goal comes off the back of a corner. We take it, the ball goes out. The ball comes back out from the corner and makes its way to Ronaldo. Dan didn't come back away from the box, so he didn't chase back and get back into position. He kept up there and made sure that the West Ham defenders realistically also had to keep him covered as well. So Ronaldo takes the ball from right back, get past his man, pushes it out to Adingra, who then takes one look up and quite literally, the same as Alderete, inch perfect cross, gets it over to Dan. Dan plants his feet and manages to head it right, perfect placement into the top left corner. Very similar position to his playoff semi-final goal as well. But Paqueta, I'm pretty sure it's Paqueta that was marking him. They just left him open, and when you're talking about teams that Sunderland are going to be up against this year, in terms of the teams that will be down the bottom and the teams that will be fighting for survival, West Ham, if I was a West Ham fan right now, and I've got a mate who is a West Ham fan, I would be worried, because they just looked so lethargic. That team, I'll be honest, that team reminded me of the team we got relegated with, in the sense that they showed up and just couldn't be fucked, to be honest. Like, they just didn't come across like they could be arsed. Realistically, Jared Bowen was the only standout. I think that Juve did have a good Premier League debut. I think he was active, he was busy. He was really one of the only players that looked like he could be bothered. Wan-Bissaka had a few times where he kind of got them up the pitch as well, but West Ham, if Bowen isn't on it and Bowen isn't able to get shots away, they look completely toothless. Completely toothless. I don't know if Paqueta is just ready to move on because there's been talks about him moving. I don't know, but they just look toothless. And Fulkrug was in the right spaces, and I think him and Bowen had some sort of improvement on their partnership, but he is just nowhere near as kind of clinical and doesn't have as much technical ability as Jared Bowen does, and it kind of showed because he left him hanging that little bit. But yeah, I mean, that second goal, a fantastic goal from Dan Ballard, but we just need to be cautious that not every single team is going to give us that, because West Ham were very poor today. They were very poor today. And then, of course, as the game goes on, we get our substitutions. So, with, of course, Jensen Seal's injury, Omar Alderete had already came on for him in the 53rd minute. Then we get Elisa Mayenda and Simon Adingra coming off in the 76th minute to be replaced by Wilson Isidore and Enzo Lefebvre. Um, Honestly, guys, so glad Wilson got his goal in this game. And I know that I've said that a couple of times now about the other lads, but in terms of Wilson, there was a lot of chat this summer about who Sunderland striker was going to be. A lot of them saying we need to replace, we need to upgrade. Fair enough, all fair points. But in amongst that conversation, there was a kind of conversation of who out of the two boys we've got, Mayenda and Isidore, who would be our starter. And a lot of people, of course, leaning with Mayenda because of how he ended the season, the playoff final, the confidence, just his ability to get He's really, really efficient as a striker, Elisa. Like, realistically, he had a handful of shots in that game, if that, and he managed to get a goal out of them. But and with Wilson as well, you're looking at a player who's maybe a little void of confidence. The second half of the season didn't really go as well for him as the first half did. And especially coming into that playoff final, I think for him, I was worried about how his confidence would be, having started the season so well in the Championship and then to be not in that starting team at Wembley. I was worried if how that would go for his confidence, especially because you've got Mayenda probably starting ahead of him, and you would assume that Chelsea would once want some sort of guarantee on minutes for Mark Gio. But Wilson came on and he took his chance. And as he says in the post match interview, a lot of the lads around him were telling him to keep the ball in play and bring it back into like the play. But he just knew he had confidence in himself and his own ability and put the ball in the back of the net. Again, a shocker from the goalkeeper because it's as if the goalkeeper's hand, when you watch it back, just disappears. But the shot itself is brilliant from Wilson and you can't take away from that. I think overall, for me, looking back at that Sunderland performance on Saturday, we just looked every part a competent Premier League team. That is not saying we're going to win every single game. Of course we're not. We're having a laugh and a joke at the end of the game, singing that we're top of the league with Regis Le Bris, and we love it, and we're going to keep being like that all season. There's going to be harder games in West Ham though. Like, they were shocking, and I think we'll keep ourselves level and grounded the same way as Regis will be telling the boys to keep themselves grounded after that one. But in terms of our players and how they played, they all just looked every part a Premier League team and just looked every part competent and capable. And I think just as well, how impressive that midfield trio are, how impressive Robin Roofs was, the way he came and collected it. He had some fantastic saves in that game, and to keep a clean sheet on our Premier League debut and come out with a 3-0 win is just sensational. I mean, last season, in terms of the three promoted teams last season, none of them got a win until October. Sunderland of the first game of the season, we've got that win, and I think just the confidence boost that will give these lads is unbelievable. But before we wrap this video up today, guys, Sunderland, of course, have announced the signing of Nordi Makiele. I don't know if I'm saying that, if I should be saying it some way different. If someone wants to spell it out in the comments for me, feel free to. Someone helped me out with a Mark Keogh shout last week, so I'm really happy. Thank you for commenting that. And also, guys, just thanks for getting involved with the South Stand. I must just say quickly, it's 3 months today since the South Stand started and since I launched it. And just the support of everyone's been brilliant. The customers that we've had, the customers we've been able to help out, getting them their Premier League kind of fanware ready. Everyone's just been brilliant. The people I've spoke to have been so supportive, loads of supportive comments, and just, yeah, I really can't ask for a better reception of how this has went so far. And even just the comments on these 4 videos. I mean, I've put a few videos out and you spend all this time doing it and you wonder if anyone's going to even see them. And the people that have been seeing them have been liking and commenting and subscribing. So thank you all for that, guys. Please keep that one up. But yeah, just gives me a little bit more confidence to keep doing it because I'm not naturally someone who would be, I don't know, like that would put myself on camera like this and talk the way I do. But yeah, just it's been great support the first few weeks as well. And I think I've wanted to do it for a while. I just never thought I'd have the confidence to. So coming on and getting these videos done and just running the South Stand in general and getting the support I have has been amazing. So thank you to everyone for that. But yeah, quickly just touching on the Nordi Makiele signing. He's coming over from PSG, another top class defender coming in at Sunderland. I think before we got over the last few weeks when we've managed to solidify getting a few more defensive signings in, it probably would have been the position that most people said we really need to solidify there. But the additions of having Omar Alderete and Norde Mukiele, both players who have played in the top levels for a while. We're talking about a two-time League One winner here, who, yes, spent a little bit of time kind of out of favour playing over in loan at Bayer Leverkusen. But from a Sunderland perspective, that's a player who now knows our captain Granit Xhaka, who's played with them, and also Mukiele's real problem over this time has been his injury record. We don't necessarily need him to start. It's about bringing in someone as competition and also bringing about someone who's going to be there to back up Trey Hume should he ever be injured. Obviously, praying that he won't be. I hope Trey's happy and healthy the whole season. But I think we just needed defensive cover there, especially if you're talking about kind of rotating squads for cup games or anything like that as well. I can't believe I'm talking about a player like him and saying rotating him, but just in terms of his injury record, that's probably just is the case. And I think it would be silly for the club to sign Trey on a 5 year contract right up in 2030 and then the next week bring in a player who's going to replace him. I just don't see that being the case. I think Trey had a very good debut yesterday in the Premier League, but he's going to come up against tougher competition. And I think having backups and multiple players in each position who can start for you is really what it's all about when it comes to building a Premier League squad. I think when you reflect on the teams last season who got relegated, it was often the case that they didn't have the depth as well. Even if they had a great starting lineup, they didn't have the depth then to compete or really bring it in that second phase when the other teams would made their substitutions. The teams couldn't compete, and I think Sunderland are making sure that that's not a problem they're going to have. Just even looking at the fact that the players we brought in, like yesterday, the players we brought on. I mean, we brought on Omar Alderete, Wilson Astor, Enzo Lefay, and Chris Rigg. All more than competent, more than capable. I think it'll be exciting to see what kind of minutes Chris gets this year. They're probably going to be limited, and I think he'll know that as well. But in terms of his development, he's now like 18 years old playing in the Premier League, so I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares. I mean, half his mates will probably just get, do you know what I mean, normal apprenticeships, been brickies or something, and he's getting to play in the Premier League. So, yeah, I don't think he cares how many minutes he gets this season, knowing that it's probably the first of many in the Premier League. But yeah, anyway, guys, look, it's another exciting week to be a Sunderland fan. I feel like this summer, before the season started, it already felt like we'd just been on this cloud nine since Wembley. But the fact we've came in and got a win and the way that we did as well, coming away with a 3-0 win, clean sheet, first game of the Premier League, yeah, let's do it. Let's do this season. If we get relegated, who gives a shit? Like, this club and this squad are going somewhere. I honestly don't think we'll get relegated. I'm looking at it going, not to say that it's just this win that's made me think that, but I think it's just the manner in which they came in. I think it's the way that Regis holds his squad and the mentality that they have. The fact that the word championship isn't even a word in the dressing room at the minute, I think it just speaks for where the club's going. They don't see themselves being a championship team next year, or at the least that's the bottom of the priorities. We're financially stable and sound if we are a championship team this next year, but I think that Sunderland are looking ahead from that now. Like, KLD didn't buy this team, didn't buy this club to be a championship club forever. It's a Premier League club, it's a Premier League asset, Premier League stadium, Premier League fans. Like, this is where we deserve to be, and I'm buzzing to be back. Anyway, guys, thanks for all the support. As I said, southstandclothing.com for any sort of t-shirts, hats, fanwear for the season ahead. We've got a long season ahead, but I am buzzing to be back. Anyway, guys, away the lads. Come on.